whenever I went and I learned what they believed, it was like, man, this is some really serious structure, and this is what I need. I didn't realize that it was extreme legalism at the time.
Hey, everybody, it's me, Julianne Hartman with The Journey, and it's going to be an incredible show today because I have Caprice Scott on here with me today. Now, I saw her on YouTube just a few times. It was just like come up on my feed. I'm like, who is this beautiful girl? So I watched a few of her teachings, and I'm like, oh my gosh, we've got to have her on The Journey. And so I know that there's going to be some incredible information going forward, and there's that thing again that always happens. We always get those incredible emails that say there was just something that so-and-so said, and it really set me free. So Caprice, thank you so much for coming on The Journey.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me. This is just awesome. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. And so I want to dive right into this because I don't know anything about you. But I know you did do an interview with Mike Hesh, and then you just told me you did one with Dr. Kevin Chapman. And those are two incredible men that I love them both, and just so blessed to have them on our platform. So let's start from the beginning. So were you raised a Christian? What did you know about Jesus when you were growing up?
I actually was raised going to church. Yes. My dad's family, they were all Baptist. My mom's family, they were Methodist. And so I attended church whenever I was little. Um, I actually, let's see, I think that once we moved to Colorado later on, because we had lived in Texas, and after we moved to Colorado, we started attending a Christian church. So yes, I basically grew up attending church, but um, I can't say that I ever really had a close relationship with the Lord, but I was always the person in my family that was more, I knew that there was more. I wanted more. I just didn't know how. I didn't know. Yeah, I thought that, well, you just go to church and that's how you know about God, you know? So that
So
was
now,
where I got started.
do you have siblings?
I have one sibling. I have a younger brother who's 4.5 years younger than I am. Yeah.
And I know that in Texas, obviously, that's the Bible Belt. Everybody goes to church, whether they're even Christians or not, it seems like.
Exactly.
I
Exactly.
always wonder, like, there's a church on literally every corner. Why isn't this whole state saved, right?
It's kind of like that. Yeah, but it's a social thing, you know?
You're absolutely right. These are Christian clubs or communities. Yeah. Because my mother moved to Texas after I had my first daughter. She got transferred by her company. So we would go to Texas, 3, 4 times a year to visit. And we weren't even saved at that time. But I would notice there's so many churches. And then when we all got saved, which was in 2000, I was like, man, there's a lot of people here that don't know Jesus. How is that possible? There's churches everywhere. So I really did notice that. But you're right. They're Christian communities.
Yes. That's exactly what it is. It's 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 the right thing to do, you know?
Right. And so and
Yeah.
honestly, that's kind of where you meet people and you do
Yes.
business with people, moms get together, but it doesn't mean that they actually know Jesus, which is a problem, obviously. So now you moved to Colorado, and I'm sure the environment was a little different in Colorado.
Oh my, yes. Much different. In Texas, it was a whole lot different in that, well, I'll just say it felt safer in a lot of ways because me and my grandparents were there. All of my family, they're all from Texas. But we moved to Colorado whenever I was in second grade, and there was a whole lot of strife in my family whenever I was very, very young. And so because of a lot of the stuff that was happening with my family, that's one of the reasons why my parents moved to Colorado. It's just kind of get away and separate from some of the stuff that was going on. But I I grew up in an alcoholic home, and moving to Colorado didn't change that. I'll say that, you know. But whenever we did move here, some of the things that did change was that the schools were a lot different. In Texas, you know, it's kind of like you've been to Texas. Whenever you go to Texas, even the kids are different. You know, they're like everybody's friendly and more friendly, nicer. And when we moved to Colorado, there were gangs, which you wouldn't expect. Yeah. And so the town that we moved to, I ended up being bullied just nonstop, all the way from, second grade on into high school. Just, and when I say bullied, I'm talking about gangs of
Oh my
girls.
God.
Yeah. So it was rough. I was not happy. I was not happy at that point to live in Colorado. Today I'm like, yay, Colorado. But whenever I was growing up, it was not a happy or safe time for me at all. It didn't feel safe at home. It didn't feel safe at school. So it was rough.
Well, then that would probably bring on a lot of fear and anxiety because you didn't feel safe anywhere. Now, did you have some friends around you that would help protect you at all or at least distract the bullies a little bit?
I had a few friends here and there. We went to church and I made friends at church in the youth group. But I can't say that those friends were actually in school later on. Especially like whenever I got into junior high. And that was a time when I was really struggling with the things that were happening, my dad being quite angry. And I want to say this, and for a lot of you viewers, sometimes people behave in a certain way. I grew up around this very angry people and unhealthy people who drank, but I didn't understand that at that time, or even until just a few years ago, that people deal with their own pain and trauma that way. And God started showing me a few years ago that this is why. And so I just want to share that briefly because whenever I'm speaking about the things that I dealt with all throughout my life, it's so important to know I understand now that my dad had a whole lot of pain. He had a lot of pain and didn't know how else to deal with it. And so he used alcohol to try to cope with that. So, yeah, I didn't feel necessarily safe at home because I got yelled at a lot. My brother and I both did. And it was one of those situations where we didn't make my dad wasn't happy with us most of the time, but it wasn't like I didn't know. I mean, I knew that he loved me. It's just that he didn't know how to show it, you know? So I ended up getting sick a lot when I was a child. And because I was getting sick a lot, I would miss school. And at the time, I didn't realize this is my brain's way of protecting me. Whenever you go to school and these bullies surround you, Julianne, there were many times that I would go to school and I would, take the bus home or whatever, and I would be surrounded by these gangs of girls that would beat me up. I would end up going home with bruised ribs and black eyes and bloody face often. My mom could tell you over and over how that happened to me so many times. And
And
so,
wait, hold on. And the school, no one did anything about it?
no. This is stuff would happen on the bus too. I was molested by a kid on the bus. And my mom went and talked to them and said, the school and bus driver and whatever. And the bus driver assigned me to sit next to this kid and basically said that I was lying about it.
Oh my God.
It was so I went through a lot of stuff like that where I didn't feel safe around
I don't
people. I
blame
didn't,
you.
yeah,
Oh my
it
gosh.
was rough.
So how did was your dad angry at the fact that people were bullying you like that and abusing you?
My dad was angry about that. That my dad is I love my dad. My dad passed away a couple of years ago, um, and that was really hard. I he didn't know how to deal with it. He was one of those people that he wanted everybody around him to like him, and everybody loved him. Everybody loved him, but he didn't know how to deal with all of the other stuff internally, and so he would come home and he was angry at us. He would take it out on us. And he didn't know how to help me deal with some of that stuff. It was usually my mom who would go and talk to, so it was awful. It was just really messy. It's really sad. I look back at that and I feel detached from my
Right.
childhood,
It's
like that
yeah.
wasn't really me.
Yeah. Well, and you're a new creature in Christ. And so, yeah,
Amen.
that girl, that offended, that sad, that bully girl doesn't exist anymore. But man, that's just crazy. So then that happened all the way through high school?
It did. It happened until actually, I guess it was my sophomore year. I I met a guy, you know, you know how that goes. I met a boy, and whenever I met him, I thought, "Oh my goodness." I think subconsciously I thought my dad would hate him. I've got to date him. Isn't that terrible?
I understand that. Yep.
Yeah. So I started seeing him, and I didn't I was constantly looking for somebody to love me and show me that I was loved and accepted. And during this time of turmoil, especially in junior high and high school, I was suicidal. I was so depressed. I was scared of people. I didn't get along with people because of all of the stuff that had happened. I didn't trust people, but I met this guy. And so I ended up getting pregnant. I ended up getting pregnant when I was 16.
Oh my gosh, you're so young.
I was very young. I was a young mom. I That was a mess. Um, but it whenever I got pregnant, my dad didn't know about it for a long time. My mom, I told her, and of course, she took me down to the crisis pregnancy center. I watched a video. They're all about keeping a baby. Because I considered having an abortion
Mhm.
because I thought there's just no way. How can I do this? And once my grandparents found out, they wanted me to have an abortion. My mom didn't, and dad didn't either once he found out. He didn't find out until 6 months. But mom was very supportive. But my grandparents basically told me that they were good at standing Texas citizens, and they basically let me know that I had soiled the family name. They didn't want me to be seen in public. They didn't want anybody to know. After I told them, "I messed up. I am gonna take responsibility for what I did, and I'm gonna have this baby." They said, "Fine, then we were gonna send you away to Louisiana to stay with your great aunt until you have the baby, and then you have to give it up for adoption." Yeah. So, I decided, no, if I'm gonna go through all of this, then I'm gonna keep the baby. And Julianne, I was such a mess in high school and junior high. I was I was an intelligent student. I was very smart in that, I mean, they had me in merit programs because I had lost so much of my hearing. This is part of my story. I had lost so much of my hearing, but I learned really well anyway. And they thought that was amazing. And so they had me in these merit programs and everything. But whenever I was so depressed, it was like I didn't care anymore. I didn't care about what I could do with my life or anything. The only thing that I kind of had going for me at that time, whenever I got pregnant, was that I had entered the Miss Teen Colorado pageant. And so I thought, well, if I have an abortion or if I lose the baby, then I can still be in the pageant. And so that was something that was like, I can't do it. I'm gonna have to. I had to let them know. Of course, I was disqualified. They kicked me out of that, which is understandable. And my dad, once he found out that I was pregnant, man, he was angry. He was angry. He would go out and chop wood whenever my boyfriend came over. He was just
Well,
mad,
okay. I,
furious.
so he probably wanted to kill the guy.
Oh yeah.
Did so the boyfriend stayed around. Now, was the boyfriend in school with you or he was older?
He was a year and a half older. He actually lived about 90 miles away from me, but he would drive down on his motorcycle to visit me at first, and then we moved to the same town that he lives in. My parents moved here to the same town that he was living in at that time, and we he decided, that yeah, he agreed that we would keep the baby, but I I ended up going to a second chance school because I decided, I can't go to a regular high school. I mean, I'm already not getting along with people because of all of this bullying and everything. So whenever I found out I was pregnant, I went to the second chance high school and my whole mentality switched because I went from not caring about life and being suicidal and thinking that a whole lot of this was God's not happy with me. God can't possibly be happy with me because of all the ways that I am just messing up my life. And so I really believe that God just probably wasn't going to forgive me for all of this. And then what happened was I went to the second chance school and they allowed me to work at my own pace. I determined, you know what? I'm going to do the very best that I can for this kid because even though I may have wrecked my life, I'm not going to wreck his. And so I ended up graduating as a junior at the top of my class before my son was born. My son was born in September, and I graduated that June before he was born. So I graduated at 17 years old, and that was fine. I had a baby later on, and then I told my boyfriend, "Look, if you want us to stay together, you've got to get your act together," because he wasn't doing well in school. He actually was supposed to graduate, of course, the year before I did. He graduated the year after I did. And I told him, he actually worked at Burger King at the time. I call this we called him a Whopper Flopper. It was kind of a, you know, so but he he worked there, and I said, you can't support, you know, a child and me by working at Burger King. You're gonna have to do something else. And so I basically told him, I said, you should go and join in the army, join the army. And so he finally graduated and he joined the army. And so I was an army wife for 6 years.
So you got married and
Yeah, we got married.
okay, so a question. How did you meet him? He lived 90 miles away. He just came into town one night?
I, my mom and brother and I were at the mall in this bigger town, and we went into you. There's I don't know if you remember these places, like Aladdin's Castle, where there's all these video games, and everything. And so my mom and I went in there to look for my brother after we had been shopping. And here's this guy who's standing over next to one of these games, and he turns around and he looks at me, he sees me, and he's like, "Come here." And I thought, "Oh my gosh, he looks like bad trouble." I went over and I said, "Hi." And he said, "So who's your friend over there?" Which is my mom, because my mom is absolutely beautiful. And so it's like, "Oh, well, my friend is interested in her, but, tell me about you." Anyway, we exchanged numbers
His
and
friend was interested in your mom. His
no, that
16-year-old
was
or
common.
15-year-old friend?
Yeah, it was common. It was common. My mom is just gorgeous. She
Oh
always
my
has been.
gosh. So
Yeah,
then that's how it happens. You exchange numbers and then yeah.
we
Wow, okay, I'm
exchanged
glad we
numbers.
told that part of it because I don't know, I just wanted to hear it. So I hope everybody else did too. Okay, so now so how's your dad dealing with things because you got now was it a shotgun wedding? Was it like a nice like what was your wedding like?
Dad didn't want us to get married. After my son was born in September, and then the following June, we got married. And so my son was about 10 months old. And my dad was so unhappy with me because it actually fell on Father's Day when we got married, which was kind of bad of me to do. I mean, I didn't intend on, ruining Father's Day for my dad, but no, dad was so unhappy about it that I remember whenever he gave me away, he walked up and, the minister asked, we actually did this in their backyard, my parents' backyard. And so the minister said, "Who gives this woman?" And my dad said, "Her mother." And I
Oh.
was not happy. Yeah, but
Wow.
it was, yeah, it was kind of, that was that was my life though. My dad was not happy with me a whole lot of the time. I remember there have been 2 times in my life that my dad told me that he was proud of me, and one of those times was whenever I graduated. Of course, graduating as a junior at the top of my class, and he told me, "I'm really proud of you." And so that was just like, okay, awesome. That's that's something in us, little girls, they want their daddy's approval. And
I
when they don't
know.
get that, they're looking for it anywhere else,
Absolutely.
unfortunately.
In all the wrong places, right? At the
Yeah,
arcade.
exactly. In the arcade.
Okay, so then you get married and now you said you're a military wife and you probably lived all in different countries, right?
We actually lived in San Antonio for a while, then we lived in Washington State for a while, and then we lived in Germany for 3 years.
Okay. And then is is that still your husband today?
No,
Okay.
no.
Remember, I don't know anything about Caprice. I'm just
Right.
finding this out. All right. So then, so your son now you said is 34, I believe.
My son is 34 years old today. Yes. So my ex-husband and I, we were married for 16 years. And unfortunately, um, my ex-husband actually came from, I want to preface this by saying he came from a worse background than I did. I mean, one of those where you expect to see something like this on a television show because it's like there's no way anybody lives like that. And I remember the first time that I went over to his house, it was I, I don't even know how to describe it except it was just like, are you kidding me? I mean, his mother would put out food for the mice in the kitchen. You know, yeah, it was they were very poor. His mother was a single mom, and his brother was in and out of jail all the time. It was just a really, really rough family. I think his mom had been married about 8 times. I may be wrong about that, but it was kind of like that, and then boyfriends in between. And so that's how my ex-husband grew up. And he didn't have any kind of a father or, to really have a clue of how to treat a woman or how to behave. And I was attracted to him because he was cute, but he was not a healthy person emotionally. And he was very emotionally abusive. I mean, I married somebody that was worse than my dad.
Oh my gosh.
Again, I look at that and say, he didn't know any better. He didn't have
You're
anything
right.
a better example. I mean, I've forgiven all of these people. I don't hold anything against them, and I understand this is where people come from. And if they don't know any better, if they didn't have anybody treating them better, then how do they know? How can they behave better without a better example?
See, and then that takes all the offense and all the hurt and the anger out of you because you have compassion for the fact that they didn't know any better. My father was the same way. He didn't know any better. It was awful his situation. So without and I mean, I'm a little bit older than you, but like that generation, no one got help for it. No one talked about that stuff. So it was just bottled up and whatever came out of the mouth is what it was. And so whether it was abuse or it was nice words, but normally it's abuse. They don't know what to do with it.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's the way my ex-husband was. That's the way my dad was. And it's sad. I mean, the 16 years that I was married to my ex-husband, I have to say it was awful. I do need to back up because there's another part of my story that I feel is really important for me to share. And that is whenever about the time right after my son was born, this was in February, right after he was born. He was born in 1990, so it would have been February of 1991. My mom and my husband, ex-husband, we weren't married yet. So he was my boyfriend at the time. And we joined the Seventh-Day Adventist Church. And that is because of where I came from, because both of my parents worked all the time, because my brother and I kind of ran around wild, not having we were latchkey kids. We didn't have our parents at home during, when we would get home from school. And I mean, my parents did the best they could in that way. But so that was I felt like joining that church whenever I went and I learned what they believed, it was like, man, this is some really serious structure. And this is what I need. I didn't realize that it was extreme legalism at the time. But so we joined the church and I also felt that this was really good. I thought this was the way that God was leading me because he wanted to give me this very specific rules to follow, which I didn't have growing up. My parents didn't really know how to enforce rules like that. And so whenever I learned about what the Adventists believe, I was like, wow, this is what I've been looking for. This must be the truth. And so that played a big part in my life as far as I was a Seventh-Day Adventist for 30 years. And my son went to yeah.
Wow. All right. Well, we are already out of time. Can you believe it? This is how fast it goes. So, wow, that is a really important part of the story. I'm glad that you brought that up. Oh my gosh, 30 years, that's a long time to have a belief system and live by it, right? So, man, well, I hope y'all watch next week because we're going to now get into her story even more and see how the other religion worked out for her. So thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for sharing these videos. Thank you, Caprice, for coming on and sharing your story. We all know that it's not easy to share your story. I mean, there are parts of it that we'll like just give away, but there are also secret parts in our lives that really are important because remember, we are healed by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. So, Caprice is in a whole different place right now. But thank God, though, that she can talk about these things because you might be caught up in the same situation, knowing that there is a way out. There is a Jesus that loves you so much. So thank you all for watching. Go to healingjourneystoday.com if you want to check out everything that we have going on. Like I said, please share these videos. And if you'd like to make any comments, you can go to healingjourneystoday@gmail.com and send us an email about this show and what you thought of it. So we love you all so much, and we'll see you next.